Welcome to Making Hasidus Real. This is part 4. So today, behemshech, in continuation to the concept of bittul, which we discussed the last 2 weeks, I wanted to shift a little bit and discuss the concept of the bittul of the world. In other words, not us becoming bottle, but understanding the bittul of the world, the olam. What we're going to discuss today and the concepts we're going to share is a very lengthy subject, brought out in so many different ways in the Rebbe Sichos and Mamorim, in so many different places. We're just going to share a few highlights. We know that the word olam, the world, the name for the world, is miloshen helem. Helem means to hide, to conceal. Which is why, when we talk about the world, by definition, the world is a place which hides Elokus, or conceals Hashem. Which is why in the Chassidic tradition, we see this all over, the approach was to be mevatel the world, to negate the world, or more importantly, to negate Weltishkeit, worldliness, materialism, world perceptions, worldly ideas, worldly philosophies, and so on and so forth. Because the world being a place which is a place of helem v'hester, it's a place of hiding, it's a place of concealment, is obviously a place which stands in the way of Yiddishkeit, of Torah mitzvahs, and our connection to Elokus. Now, just to name, there's so many examples, we'll just name a few examples of this. We see in the Frierdiker Rebbe, for example, in the Maimer Basel Lagani, where he talks about Shtus L'Umazeh, and part of that, breaking the Shtus L'Umazeh, the Frierdiker Rebbe talks a lot about not following Weltische Hanoches, worldly principles, worldly outlooks, like dafka certain times to eat, or whatever the worldly perceptions and outlooks are, depending on the time and so on. There's a story, just to bring it out, a story that the Rebbe told, and obviously the Rebbe told it because he wanted us to learn from it. About two Chassidim. There was Reb Michal der Alter, Michal Blinder, as he was sometimes known, and he once traveled to Moscow, and in Moscow there was a Chassid of Shmuel Michal Treinen. And they were walking in the street. Shmuel Michal was someone who lived in Moscow, was more sort of integrated into the Moscow environment, so to speak. And Reb Michal der Alter was a emes Chassidish Yid, and he wasn't exactly dressed in a very sophisticated ways, and his buttons didn't match, or whatever the case was. And while they were walking, Reb Shmuel Michal Treinen sort of said something to Reb Michal. To which Reb Michal responded, Shmuel Michal, in was du liegst? Like, are you serious? Like, where's your focus? Like, what are you living in? What are you ligging in, so to speak? Right? So many times the Rebbe would make fun of materialism, would make fun of people wanting to have the latest fashions in their homes, in their kitchens, in their carpets, whatever the case is. I remember a Sikha when the Rebbe spoke about someone that imported a special table. I think it was from Italy, if I'm not mistaken, but and he said he justified it by the fact that he needed to put a Tanya on that table. And the Rebbe made complete litzanos from it, complete fun. So there was this idea of not following world, not following Weltishkeit, not following worldliness, and generally anything to do with Welt, everything to do with materialism, anything to do with world outlooks and philosophies and perspectives, was very, very much looked down upon. However, sometimes the confusion sets in with the following idea. We know that, putting that aside, we are also commanded, and we are also told and instructed to engage with the world. We have this idea in Chassidus of Dirah B'Tachtonim. We have to make a dwelling place for Hashem in the world, which, particularly maybe in Dor Hashvi, maybe even more than before, we are given the shlichus of using the world for Elokus, like the Rebbe spoke about the famous sikh about radio. That if Hashem created something, it can be a place where we can reveal Elokus. Using the world, using every part of the world, going to all parts of the world, being in all sorts of societies, like the Rebbe sent shluchim to every single pinon nidachas, every single part of the world, every single distant part of the world, distant both begashmias and beruchnias, in order to bring a lakus there. And I think sometimes what happens is we get confused about, so then is the world significant? Is the world important? Obviously, it has an importance because without the world, we can't make a dirah b'tachtonim. We learn that it's specifically this world. This is the place that God chose to reveal His essence, and to dwell in, to be invited in to make a dirah b'tachtonim. So how do we put those two things together, and what is the formula? And really, if we think about it, the formula is actually fairly simple. Now again, when we talk about an idea, we have to talk about an idea in its purity. This is the theme what we've been saying many times. We have to talk about how it really is supposed to be. And then, of course, apply it to our own experience as much as we possibly can. So the answer is a simple formula. On the one hand, we have to know that the world, as an independent thing, is treif, is something which is a helem v'hester and alakus. It is something which we should not want to be involved in. It's something we shouldn't want to engage in. It's something we shouldn't want to connect to. We should be wanting naturally by default to run away from anything that smells of Welt and Weltishkeit, because anything that is part of Welt and Weltishkeit is really a helem v'hester, it's concealment of alakus, and it's really nothing. It's really nothing. The big world, that the Rebbe in Parshas Eikev, a famous Sikha, just last week's Parsha, talks about the beginning of a Yid's experience of Golus. How does a Yid engage with Golus? How does a Yid become affected by Golus? So we know the famous pasuk, HaMidbar, HaGodel, VaHanoira, Nochosh, Sora, VaAkrav. The Midbar, the Rebbe explains, is a place void of Elakus. It's a place void of Yidden. It's a place of Golus. What's the first challenge of Midbar? HaGodel. We think it's significant, we think it's big. We think that Welt is Taka Metzias, that big world out there is Taka something to be impressed about. Our default position is, this world is nothing. It's Kula Kamei Kalachoshiv. It means nothing, it's not significant. Anything Welt and Weltishkeit is complete nonsense. However, once we understand that, once we come to that, then we have to realize, so what are the Eibush to create us for? The only Metzias of the world, the only significance the world has, is a place to make a dira b'tachtonim. But here goes the formula of how it works. If we see world as something significant, if we see Welt as something significant, what happens to us then is we start to become comfortable with the Weltishkeit, and we forget that its only Metzias is to bring a lukus. And we start to give chashivus, start to give importance to the world itself. So really it has to go, both things have to operate together. First, we have to see the world for what it is, a helem v'hester, a concealment of alakus, and really in theory, want nothing to do with it, so to speak, just be mevatel it as much as we possibly can. Like we found so many stories by Chassidim that they had placed no importance on materialism, on gashmias, on anything to do with Welt or Weltishkeit, and only then can we say, so what am I doing here? But I have to engage with the Welt in order to make it dir b'tachtonim. So let's just give a few examples of how this plays out. Famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek, when he was a child, asked the Alter Rebbe about something he had learned in Cheder. The Balaturim says, Vayichi Yaakov be'Eretz Mitzrayim, that Yaakov lived in Eretz Mitzrayim for 17 years. The Balaturim says 17 is the gematria of Toiv. The best years of Yaakov were in Mitzrayim. The Tzemach Tzedek went to ask the Alter Rebbe, how could the best years be in such a low place like Mitzrayim? And the Tzemach Tzedek answered him that Yehuda Shalach L'Fanav L'Horis L'Fanav Goishna, that they made a yeshiva there. When you learn Torah, even in Mitzrayim there can be Vayichi. Now it's a long sikha, but people can check it out. But the Nakuda that the Rebbe explains as follows: L'Cha'ira, we see that the Tzemach Tzedek didn't actually answer the question. The question wasn't just how you can be gelept in Mitzrayim. The question was how your best years can be in Mitzrayim. But the essence of the sikha is that the Tchilas HaChinuch, the beginning of the journey, of course the best years can be in Mitzrayim, because ultimately when you take choshech, when you take darkness, and you turn it into oir, that's the Yisroin Oir Min HaChoshech. It's the most amazing thing. Like the idea of the Rebbe Tachtonim. Yisroin Oir Min HaChoshech. When you take the choshech, the darkness of the world, you turn it into lakus. That's an amazing thing. But a person at the beginning of the journey, and the Tzemach Tzedek was a child, has to know that no, the beginning of the journey has to be, I want to be away from Mitzrayim. I don't want to have anything to do with Mitzrayim. The Rebbe explains how the Alter Rebbe hinted in his answer what the real answer was, but he didn't tell explicitly to the Tzemach Tzedek, because step one is to reject world. Step one is, and it's always been part of Chassidus and Chassidim, to reject Welt and to reject Weltishkeit. It's very similar to what the Rebbe explains in Parshas Korach, a famous sikh in Peichelek Ches. The Rebbe goes through the Kuf, Reish, Ches, the different letters. I'm not going to go through the whole thing now, but the Nekuda is like this. The Rebbe explains that each one of the Kuf, Reish, Ches is a deviation from the Hey. And what's the Ches? The Ches is the person, because the Rebbe explains that the top line and the right line, that's Machshava and Dibur, that's the world of Ruchnius. The left leg is that world of Maisa, of action. So he says the problem with the Ches is like this. The Ches is the Baal Esek, the person who's engaged with world, who's very comfortable there, because he thinks that's the Kavanah. The Kavanah is to make a Dirah B'Tachtonim. So of course, I am as important as the Rosh Hashiva, I'm as important as a Yoshev oil, I'm as important as someone who's Ruchni, because after all, the Kavanah, the intention of B'riyas Ha'olam is to make a Dirah B'Tachtonim. The Rebbe says that's a major mistake. The only way it could actually work is the Hey. The Hey, the left leg is detached, there's always yearning. In other words, yes, we have to engage in the world. We have to engage in Welt in order to make a Dirah B'Tachtonim, but we mustn't want to be in Welt. We must always want to be somewhere else. We must always want to be by Chassidische Verbrechen. We must always want to be rejecting Welt. We must always want to be going to a shir, davening. That's the world we have to really want to be in. But we have to be in the Welt to make a Dirah B'Tachtonim. It's like they tell a story, I'm not sure what the story is based on, but it's the story of a Chassidish Rebbe. They say that once a Talmid came, he called one of his Chassidim and says, you have to go away very, very far away, and that's your kavanah to teach Torah or whatever, and the Chassid didn't want to go. And he sort of argued and he saw he's getting nowhere, but the Rebbe says, you know what, you have to go, but once in a while you can come back and you charge your batteries. So the Chassid saw a little bit of an opening, so he says to the Rebbe, okay, so how often can I come back? The Rebbe says, it works like this. I want you to send you far away. As long as you feel very uncomfortable there and you're dying to come back, you can stay there. As soon as you feel comfortable and you feel relaxed there, come right back. We cannot be comfortable in Welt, because then we become comfortable with Weltishkeit and we forget what the Kavanah is to bring a lakus, to make a Dirah B'Tachtonim in the Welt. There's a sikha of the Rebbe about Yosef ve'Echov. Yosef, of course, different to his brothers, was really in Welt. In fact, in a way, we can take our sort of modern-day formula from Yosef. We are the Yosefs because we mamish in the Welt making a Dirah B'Tachtonim. The brothers were Royei Tzoyin. They wanted to live more of a life of Ruchnius. But the Rebbe explains that it's a very deep and involved sikha, but the Nakuda is like this. The Nakuda is that the reason that the Shvatim didn't go into the world, because they knew that the world was a hell of a hester, but they were worried that world would affect them, because on some level, in a very refined, dakostic way, Welt, world still affected them. Yosef was such a madrega of total bittul. In other words, to him, the world meant absolutely nothing. It wasn't toifas makim. That's why he could live there and not be affected. And I think it's such an important formula for us. Dafka today, when we live in the world and we're supposed to be and engage in the world and make it a Dirah B'Tachtonim, it comes with the attitude, it comes with the mindset that Welt is mamish nothing. And we have to remember that and talk about it and think about it and let it affect us. So, what does that mean in practice? Again, do we feel the world is mamish nothing? Are we not affected by the Welt at all? Is Welt mamish not a metzias by us, like it was by some older Chassidim? No, we're not in that madrega, but we have to have that mindset, and we have to let it affect us, make a dent in the way we serve Hashem. And we have to constantly think about it. And constantly think about it, the fact that we are in the Welt, we're living in places which are very Weltish. Are we rejecting it on some level? Are we making sure that we always remember how nothing it is? And its only purpose is to make a Dirah B'Tachtonim. Have a good day.